Today, Congressman DeFazio, I, Senator Whitehouse, and also Senator Sanders are introducing the Wall Street Trading and Speculation Tax Act of 2013. The American people overwhelmingly agree that deficit reduction in this country must come from a balance of spending cuts and necessary revenue increases. Let me put it bluntly, we need the new revenue that would be generated by this tax in order to reduce deficits and maintain critical investments in education, infrastructure, and job creation. And there's no question that Wall Street can easily bear this modest tax. Frankly, I predict that once it's in place, few will even notice it. The Joint Tax Committee estimated that a very similar measure introduced by us in the last Congress would raise $352 billion over 10 years. The measure will place a tax of just 3 basis points on certain financial transactions. 3 basis points means that it would be 3 pennies per $100, not 3 cents on the dollar, but 3 cents on every $100 of trades. It would not cover the buying of goods or services or the original issuance of stocks or bonds or other debt. But it would cover traded stocks, traded bonds, derivative contracts, options, puts, forward contracts, swaps, and other complex instruments, all at their actual purchase cost. As we move toward a more balanced approach in reducing our deficits, I think this will become a very viable option. And I note that most Republicans are seeking areas where they can raise revenue in order to reduce tax rates overall. I think that's another reason why this will become a viable option. So I have to ask, what other options are there for raising $350 billion with such a negligible impact on middle-class Americans and Main Street businesses? And I would also note that we had a far higher transaction tax on stocks up until the 1960s. And on Tuesday, all three of us met with Mr. Shimata, the European Union Tax Commissioner. He noted that 11 Eurozone countries, after thorough analysis and debate, are moving forward with a very similar tax in Europe. Actually, the EU transaction tax has higher rates than we're proposing. Theirs is at 10 basis points rather than 3 basis points. So it has already cleared all of the multinational hurdles within the EU and expected to go into force later this year. So this Wall Street tax is a simple matter of fairness and fiscal sanity. I am very optimistic about our prospects in this Congress. With that, I'll turn it over to Congressman DeFazio.
Thanks, Tom. Appreciate your leadership on this issue. Thanks, Sheldon, for being the original sponsor in the Senate. Here we are struggling with sequestration, but indiscriminate across the board budget cuts because some believe that our debt crisis is so overwhelming and so eminent we have to do things that don't make much sense to deal with it. Well, here's something that would make a lot more sense. We have here a proposal that would both raise revenue and bring more stability to the financial markets, favoring long-term value investors, those who want to build an economy. As Tom mentioned, it's extraordinary what we hear from Wall Street now. I went back and read through the Wall Street Journal back in the 1930s. We had a tax in place, and Congress in 1934 doubled the transaction tax on Wall Street trading. If you read what they said then, it's what they're saying now. It'll be an end to liquidity. It'll be an end to the growth of they would go on and on and on. It's all the same things that Wall Street's saying today. Well, Congress had the guts back then to double the tax at the height of the Great Depression and use that money to rebuild the real economy, to put people back to work. That's the same situation we're in today. We need to put people back to work. We need to rebuild our real economy. And at the same time, while we're doing that and making those investments, we have to figure out how to deal with our growing burden of debt. So I believe that this tax is a tax whose time has come for many, many reasons. And with the EU moving ahead, ironically, Wall Street trading in any one of those 11 countries will be assessed the tax, but they will have to remit the tax to that country since we don't have one here. If we had one here and we had reciprocity, they would be collecting the tax on those trades in those countries, and those revenues would be benefiting the United States of America. So I think we're very close now to dispelling all the myths that and shrouds of crepe that create black freight that Wall Street has tried to put on our bill as the EU moves forward, and I'm very hopeful that as part of some sort of long-term grand bargain here, we will include a transaction tax.
I'm very pleased to be joining Chairman Harkin and Representative DeFazio as an original co-sponsor of their financial transactions tax legislation. The fact that this is already emerging internationally with 11 countries already signed on, I think dispels a lot of the myths that have been propagated about it. The $350+ billion in revenue that it will create can be used to help with our deficit, can be used to help lower rates in any grand bargain, and can be used to help head off the most punishing cuts of the sequester. It also has the added benefit, as my colleagues have pointed out, that for real investments in the real economy, it will have a de minimis effect. For the high-speed trading and finagling that adds so much risk to our economy, there it will have a more pronounced effect, and that's probably a good thing for the average American. So I'm delighted to be a part of this, and I want to thank Chairman Harkin and Representative DeFazio for their leadership.
Thank you very much. Again, I just one little summation. Again, you're going to hear from people on Wall Street, as Peter said, that's just going to reduce liquidity, slow things down, impinge upon our economy. And that's just nonsense. It's not going to happen at all. And in fact, if it does slow down some of these high-speed microsecond trades, it will add to the stability, as you said, Sheldon. It will add actually to the stability in the marketplace for long-term investors who really do want to put their money in instruments that will be there for them when they retire. So I think this has a lot of good balances on it. We raise the revenue, which we can invest in real job creation in this country. Secondly, it will add more stability, I think, to the marketplace, and will put us on a more even footing with the European countries that are moving ahead in this area. Question? Yes.
Yes, the administration has obviously opposed this kind of tax in the past. Why would it change its mind now, and are you in talks with them about going forward?
Well, I think that there were certain elements in the administration in the past that the peers were more closely attuned to what Wall Street was saying. I'm not certain that's the case any longer. And I think as the administration begins to work with Congress to try to find revenues, I think this is going to be one area where the impact on Main Street businesses, the average American, on our economy as a whole will be de minimis, as Sheldon said, and it will be an important part of raising revenues that we need for a balanced approach.
If you read the Susskind book, in there he says that President Obama was actually very interested in the idea of a transaction tax. Unfortunately, it was assigned to Larry Summers and Timmy Geithner, who were both absolutely opposed to it, and they deep-sixed it and never brought anything back to them. Well, they're both gone, thankfully, gone to catch their rewards from Wall Street. This, I think, will give the administration an opportunity to listen to other economists, other financiers. I mean, when you have the founder of Vanguard saying this would be beneficial, when you have Warren Buffett supporting the concept of a transaction tax, other Nobel Prize winning economists saying this would be beneficial not only for revenues but for the financial markets. I think that there will be perhaps a different approach in the second 4 years of the Obama administration.
And the administration does have to work with us too, not just the Republicans.
Are you guys pushing this as a way of dealing with this sequester? Is it a way of addressing the sequester or replacing it?
I think we're looking at a continuing discussion about our budget, about our deficit, about our investment in jobs. That's going to continue for the next few months as we vote for budgets in the Senate. That is going to be part of that discussion. as we face the continuing resolution that expires March 27th. That's going to be part of that discussion. As we deal with the painful consequences, the painful and unnecessary consequences of the sequester, that's going to be part of that discussion. And as we find ways to invest in jobs, that's going to be part of that discussion. And so I think it's a context beyond just the sequester, but I think that in the larger topic of how do we create an economy that has a deficit under control and growth for the average American family, this is an important part of that discussion.
Yes?
Have you reached out to any Republicans to see if there's a version of this tax, a concept of a transaction tax that they might be able to support or incorporate into a bigger package?
Well, I haven't yet reached out. We wanted to get this out in the marketplace, if you might say, ideas on what we need to do. Most Republicans, well, every Republican that I know is adamantly come out against any revenue whatsoever, period. Well, as we move towards a grand bargain, and we know we have to have revenues as well as spending cuts, well, then I think they're also going to be looking for ways, because they do want to, they've already said they want to reduce rates across the board. Well, that costs something. How do you fill in for that? Well, this might be a filler. So but I don't expect them to leap forward on it anytime soon, but as we get down to those negotiations, I think this will become, as I said earlier, a very viable option for Republicans. I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
Well said.
Yes?
I believe you both, or at least one of you, would have met with Jack Lew. What was his response when you brought up the transaction tax?
Well, I'll tell you. I wasn't in the meeting that maybe Peter had, but I will tell you that I've known Jack Lew for a long, long time. I want to meet with him, even on all the committee votes on it. Here's the difference. Last fall, it was September, if I'm not mistaken, Mr. Geithner came up and spoke to our caucus, and I asked him about this transaction tax. I told him at the time that it looked like the Europeans were moving towards this, having a transaction tax, because I had had a discussion with him before about it, and he was absolutely opposed to it. So I brought it up to him that the Europeans look like they're moving ahead for this. And you know what he told me? He said, I hope not. That was Mr. Geithner.
So what about Mr. Lew?
So then I talked with Mr. Lew about the transaction tax, and he said, well, I can't put words in his mouth, but he didn't say no, or he didn't, I mean, he wasn't saying no like Mr. Geithner was. He was saying that he was basically open to looking at it and to engaging in further discussions on it. So that's just the difference in two secretaries of the Treasury. Did you have a discussion with him?
I did recently bring up the issue with Madame Lagarde when she was here and asked her position with the IMF and asked her to comment on Europe going forward. And, you know, she said that, you know, the concept was good. She was concerned about how you know, she would like the funds to be dedicated to some sort of financial stability fund, but didn't object to the idea of the tax itself. So, I mean, obviously, you know, there will be ongoing discussions about if such a tax were implemented, would it be dedicated to something? We were theoretically going to be taxing the banks to create a large stability fund here, and that hasn't gone forward. So, you know, there are many, many uses and needs potentially for this money. And I think the interest is growing in different sectors.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.